Your wedding, the shame of this family, is hardly worth calling an event. Katie's match is far more important to us as a family. I stared at those words glowing on the cold screen of my smartphone, standing there in my wedding dress. My vision blurred and the pounding of my heart echoed loudly in my ears. Outside, a flawless blue sky stretched overhead, and I could hear the staff preparing for the garden ceremony. Yet around me alone, everything felt frozen in an unnatural silence. Today was my wedding day. It was the beginning of my new chapter with Sean, the man who had supported me both personally and professionally for the past 3 years, and my partner in founding our tech startup together. We had deliberately avoided extravagance, choosing instead to prepare a warm, intimate ceremony with only the people who truly mattered to us. 3 months earlier, I had told my parents only this. October 14th. I have an extremely important event in my life, so please keep the day open. I chose the words extremely important event as my final gamble. If they truly cared about me as their daughter, surely they would come. That was my faint, fragile hope. But reality was merciless. Katie's practice match? I murmured to myself, my voice trembling. Katie is my younger sister, 4 years younger than me. From a young age, she was hailed as a rising star in women's soccer and monopolized our mother's excessive devotion. But today's match was nothing more than a practice game. Not an official match, not an important tournament with scouts in attendance. And yet, my mother chose my sister's practice match without hesitation, casting aside the most important day of my life as a family disgrace. Tracy, what's wrong? You look pale. Sean, dressed impeccably in his tuxedo, spoke to me from behind. In his gentle eyes I saw nothing but pure love and concern. I tried to hide my phone, but it was too late. He caught a glimpse of the screen as it nearly slipped from my hand, and in an instant his expression hardened with anger. Unbelievable. Do your parents seriously mean this? I'm sorry, Sean. My family is being disrespectful. To you and your family as well. Don't apologize, Tracy. This isn't your fault. They're the ones being cruel. How can the parents who raised such an incredible woman be capable of something this heartless? Sean pulled me tightly into his arms. Feeling his warmth, I finally let a single tear fall. To my parents, especially my mother, the only child worth boasting about was Katie. Whenever Katie scored a goal, the entire house erupted in celebration. When she wanted new cleats, my parents would scrape together the money to buy them for her. Meanwhile, no matter how well I did in school, or even when I was accepted into a top university, my mother's response was always the same. Oh, that's nice. Anyway, about Katie's next away match. My father never stopped her favoritism. Peace is what matters most, he would always say, treating my existence as part of the background to keep the household balanced and my mother appeased. Tracy, look outside, Sean said softly. When I turned toward the window, I saw his parents gazing sadly at the empty seats reserved for my family. Sean's parents had supported me like a daughter during the difficult early days of my startup. They understood my passion for my work and respected me as an individual, because I knew that warmth, the cold rejection from my own parents, cut even deeper. Sean, I've made my decision. I wiped away my tears and looked at my reflection in the mirror. I'm done waiting for them, and from this moment on, I'm cutting ties with my family. Tracy, I kept hoping, somewhere deep down, that one day they'd truly see me, that one day they'd say they were proud of me, but that hope only bound me and hurt me. Today, I'm breaking those chains. My family is you, and the people here who truly love me. Sean nodded deeply and kissed my forehead. I've been waiting to hear you say that. Your life belongs to you. Come on, everyone's waiting. The wedding bells rang out. I stood at the entrance of the aisle. Where my father should have been standing, there was only one member of my family, my grandfather, Arthur. Tracy, you made the right choice, he said, gently wrapping his wrinkled hand around mine. Your parents are chasing after false brilliance, blind to the real gem right in front of them. But don't worry. Your grandfather knows how strong, noble, and beautiful your soul truly is. Grandpa, thank you. Taking his arm, I stepped forward down the aisle. In the venue, there were 3 empty seats reserved for my parents and my sister. Decorated with white ribbons, those chairs seemed to symbolize the emptiness of my past. Among the friends in attendance, I could hear whispers of confusion and sympathy about the absence of the bride's parents. Still, I lifted my chin and kept my eyes fixed straight ahead. When it came time to say my vows, my voice never wavered. Whether in health or in sickness, and no matter how many people in this world may deny me, I vow to believe in myself and to build a new future together with Sean, who stands beside me. Those words were not only a vow to Sean, but a declaration to myself. After the ceremony, back in the waiting room, I opened my smartphone, and a photo posted by Katie on social media caught my eye. It showed my mother and father sitting on a soccer field bench, smiling broadly as they surrounded Katie. The caption read, "Best family ever. It's just a practice match, but having mum and dad cheering for me makes us unbeatable." Under the post, my mother had left a comment. "Our only pride is you, Katie." The moment I read that sentence, the final thread inside me snapped with an audible force. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sorrow, it was a crystal clear, cold resolve that took complete control of me. Goodbye, Mum, goodbye, Dad, and goodbye, Katie. Right then and there, I blocked every one of their contact numbers and unfollowed them on all social media platforms. Sliding my phone deep into my bag, I took Sean's hand and headed for the dance floor. That day marked the first day of my true life. From the very wedding they had dismissed as meaningless and branded a family disgrace, I chose to be reborn. From that day on, I poured every ounce of my energy into my business. If I had time to grieve, I had time to write one more line of code, to negotiate with one more investor. That was my way of fighting back. 1 year later, the tech company Sean and I had founded together, NovaStream, reached a major turning point in its fourth year. The next generation, AI-powered supply chain optimization system we developed was adopted by one of the largest distribution chains in the United States. "Tracy, it's done. The deal is signed." Sean burst into the office, and without even standing up from our chairs, we shook hands with overwhelming force. It was the first step into a place so far beyond reach that the people who once stole my tuition and called me a family disgrace could never touch it, even if they stood on their heads. From there, our growth was nothing short of explosive. Our system became the industry standard, revenue surged to 400% year over year, and our workforce expanded rapidly into the hundreds. I was transformed into a CEO, always dressed in impeccably tailored jackets, negotiating head-to-head with battle-hardened executives using razor-sharp strategies. And then one day, it happened without warning. "Tracy, we've received an unbelievable inquiry." My assistant placed a magazine on my desk, barely able to contain her excitement. It was an interview request from Fortune, the business magazine revered as a Bible by professionals around the world. "They want you for the main feature of their CEOs to watch this year issue." I accepted the request calmly. I was surprised, but not shaken. After all, I had sacrificed everything for this moment. On the day of the interview, I stood in a special studio overlooking the New York skyline, bathed in camera flashes. The interviewer was a veteran journalist, famous for her incisive questions. After thoroughly questioning me about my business model, she softened her tone and asked, "Tracy, your success has been nothing short of remarkable. Many of our readers are curious about your background. Could you tell us about the guidance and support from your family that drove you to where you are today?" Most executives would have responded with a familiar, heartwarming story. "I'm grateful for my parents' love," or "I owe everything to my family's support." But I was different. I looked straight into the camera and without a moment's hesitation began to speak quietly. "I am where I am today thanks to the support of my grandfather, my husband, and my parents-in-law. There was absolutely no support from my biological parents in my success. In fact, my life has been a process of systematically removing my relationship with my parents and my sister." The air in the studio froze instantly. I could see the reporter's eyes widen as her pen stopped mid-motion. I continued without pause. "Years ago, my biological parents stole the funds my grandfather had set aside for my education. That money never went to my tuition. Instead, it paid for my sister's red sports car and the down payment on her apartment. To cover my tuition, I worked 3 jobs a day and graduated from college on the verge of collapse." I deliberately laid out the facts, calmly, methodically, and with brutal precision. And what was even more cruel, I added, meeting the reporter's gaze, was that my parents continued lying to my grandfather, the only person who truly understood me. I later learned that they repeatedly told him, "Tracy is living comfortably and receiving more than enough support," completely concealing the truth that my tuition had been stolen and that I was drowning in despair. I held the reporter's eyes as I continued. "Even so, My grandfather had already seen through my parents' lies. He would slip small bills into the letters he sent me, along with a short note that read, "I won't let anyone steal your dreams." While my parents were trying to consume my future, my grandfather alone continued to support me, holding on as if keeping a fragile thread from snapping. The reporter nodded, her eyes glistening. And then there was my wedding a few years ago. My parents called the most important day of my life a family disgrace, and chose to skip it in favour of my sister's mere practice match. That was when I cut ties with my parents and my sister. You don't need a loving family or a privileged upbringing to succeed. What you do need is the courage to completely sever ties with those who deny your worth and try to exploit you, and to believe in your own value no matter what. That is the only reason I'm standing here today. When the interview ended, an indescribable shock rippled through the studio staff. Only Sean, standing in the shadows, smiled at me and gave a quiet thumbs up. A few weeks later, the article was published. On the cover was my image, confident and unflinching, and the headline read in bold letters, "The woman who abandoned the illusion of family and built her own empire." The article laid everything bare. My upbringing, my parents' cruelty, and the story of how I'd pushed through it all to rise to the position of CEO. Its impact far exceeded my expectations. My reputation in the business world soared, but the greatest shockwave hit my hometown, the very community where my parents still lived. That narrow world where my mother used to boast about Katie's achievements online, chatting proudly with neighbours about her star child. Into that peaceful yet deeply deceptive community, Fortune magazine dropped a bomb. One day, Sean and I sat in our living room, scrolling through notifications on a tablet. While our company, NovaStream, continued to see its stock price climb, a very different kind of chaos was unfolding around my parents' home. "Tracy, take a look. It looks like your mother's social media account didn't just blow up, it was completely shut down." Just as Sean said, countless critical comments from local residents and former acquaintances had flooded her account. "I can't believe she stole Tracy's tuition. She called her own daughter a disgrace and skipped her wedding to attend her sister's practice match. What a horrible mother. To abandon a daughter who ends up in Fortune. That's a complete lack of humanity." The sandcastle my mother had spent years building, the ideal mother, the family that raised a successful child, collapsed in an instant. But this was only the beginning. 2 weeks after Fortune hit the stands, my phone became noisier than ever. Of course, all direct contact from my family was blocked, but relatives and people from my hometown began messaging me one after another. "Tracy, your mother is so shaken she can't even leave the house. Did you really have to let them write such a detailed article? Your family. Don't air your dirty laundry like that." Reading my aunt's message, I let out a cold laugh. I sent her one, and only one, clinical reply. I simply told the truth as it was. The ones who brought shame are not me, but my parents themselves, who committed shameful acts against me. Do not contact me again. The moment I sent it, I added her to my block list as well. According to people from my hometown, the situation there was far worse than I had imagined. The label, "The parents who exploited and abandoned a daughter featured in Fortune," had been burned onto my parents like an indelible brand. On the streets where my mother once strutted proudly, boasting about Katie's soccer achievements, people now whispered, pointed, and cast looks of open contempt whenever she appeared. "Tracy, I heard from your grandfather," Sean said quietly as I reviewed documents in my office. What my grandfather relayed made it clear that the collapse of my family had entered its final stage. "Your father apparently went to your grandfather in tears. He's thinking about getting a divorce." I set my pen down. The man who had always obeyed my mother, who had prioritized keeping the peace above all else, was finally trying to make a decision. "According to your grandfather, your father read the Fortune article and was forced to confront for the first time everything he had ignored. Being called a thief by neighbours and losing his place at work finally made him realise how serious it all was. Through my grandfather, my father sent me a long message of apology. It was filled with regret, admitting that he knew about my stolen tuition and chose to stay silent, apologising for missing my wedding, and repeating the words, 'I failed as a father.' But my heart didn't move at all. It's far too late now, I murmured to myself. Back in those days when I truly needed help, every time my father chose silence, a small part of me died. No matter how many apologies he poured out now, what was broken would never return. My mother's reaction, however, stood in stark contrast. Instead of acknowledging her wrongdoing, she only amplified her resentment. Through a relative, she sent me this message. How dare you turn me into a laughingstock in front of the entire world? Do you have any idea who made it possible for you to go to college? It was me. I raised you. Just because you found success, you think you can sell out your own parents? Don't you have a heart? To the cousin who relayed that message to me, I gave only this reply. Yes. On the day my tuition was stolen, the heart of a daughter I once cherished was taken from me by my mother. Please tell her that if she continues to involve herself in my life, I will not hesitate to pursue legal action. And the most ridiculous situation of all was Katie's. She had been indulged her entire life as a future star athlete, but after Fortune's expose, it became public knowledge that both the sports car she drove and the apartment she lived in had been paid for with money exploited from her sister. Rumours even reached me that one of the sponsors of her soccer team was considering pulling its support for her personally, concerned about reputational damage. Because of you, my career is ruined. What are you going to do about this? It was a hysterical voice message from Katie, sent through an acquaintance. I listened for only a few seconds before deleting it. Tracy, it might be time to settle things with them directly, Sean said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. They're asking for a chance to apologize. Through a local lawyer, they want a meeting. It's your father's request. Apparently, he plans to drag your mother there as well. I gazed out the window. I now had a company to protect, a husband I loved, and a position that no one could infringe upon. All right, Sean, I'll meet them, but I'll be the one to choose the place. Our company's conference room. I decided to invite them into my empire. The people who once called me a family disgrace and forced me to crawl across cold ground. I wondered what expressions they would wear when they stood before the desk of the CEO featured in Fortune magazine. I swore to myself that I would show no mercy. A few days later, on the top floor of our office building, the door opened, and guided by my assistant, the three of them entered. My father, aged, his eyes darting nervously. My mother, her face flushed red with anger and humiliation, looking ready to explode at any moment. And Katie, wearing a flashy tracksuit, yet stripped of confidence, her expression fearful. I sat back deeply in my top-of-the-line executive chair and slowly uncrossed my legs. Welcome, Dad, Mom, and Katie. Welcome to our company. My voice sounded colder and more beautiful than I expected, even to myself. The three of them standing before my desk looked painfully out of place in this refined, polished space. Tracy, is it really true? You're the CEO of this company? My father murmured, his voice trembling. As he took in the soaring ceilings and the composed, efficient employees moving about, he finally seemed overwhelmed by how far his daughter had risen. Yes, that's right. The daughter you once called a family disgrace is the CEO of this company. Thank you for taking the time to come, despite your busy schedules. At my icy words, my mother finally snapped. Tracy, enough already. That article, letting Fortune print such outrageous lies. Because of it, I can't even show my face in the neighborhood. I was forced to step down from the country club board. You've completely ruined my life. She leaned forward, slamming the desk as if she might strike it. Her face was twisted with rage and unmistakable fear. Outrageous lies! I slowly placed a copy of the magazine on my desk. Mom, Fortune is one of the world's most respected business publications. Their reporters verified every single thing I said. The fact that my college fund was taken, bank records, testimonies from the part-time jobs I worked simultaneously. Everything was confirmed. Which part exactly is a lie? That was a family matter. In a family, a little flexibility is normal. Calling it stolen makes it sound so ugly. And that wedding, it was small, barely any guesses. It wasn't a big deal. I let out a quiet sigh, never admitting fault, always casting herself as the victim. The old me might have desperately argued, cried, and begged to be understood, but all I felt now was deep contempt. Mom, I told you my wedding was the most important event of my life. Did you ever once try to think about what mattered to your daughter? My work, my partner, my life. The only thing you ever cared about was Katie's soccer score. Tracy, that's cruel. Katie finally spoke up, tears welling in her eyes. Because of your article, my sponsorship deals were cancelled. I might not even be able to go on tour next season. You're already rich, aren't you? So stop bullying me. We're family. Supporting my career is the least you can do. I met Katie's gaze head on. Katie, your career was built on my sacrifice. While I was working day and night, cutting sleep to study, you were driving around in a sports car bought with that money. Did you really think a success gained by devouring someone else's future would last forever? That was Mom and Dad's decision. It has nothing to do with me. Of course it does. You knew. You knew everything, and you benefited from it. What you're facing now isn't bullying. It's simply reality catching up with you. Stand on that pitch with nothing but your own ability. If you can. Katie was left speechless, tears streaming down her face. Tracy, I'm sorry. Suddenly, my father whispered those words. My mother snapped, "What do you think you're saying?" and struck my father, but he brushed her hand away and looked straight at me. After I read that article, I couldn't sleep at night. I told myself I just wanted to keep peace in the family, but in doing so, I sealed off your suffering. I was a cowardly father. With trembling hands, he held out an envelope. This is money I saved on my own. It doesn't come close to the $30,000 I owe you, but please, let me start by returning this. I'll repay the rest little by little from my monthly salary, no matter how many years it takes. I've started counseling as well, and I intend to move forward with a divorce from your mother. My mother screamed, "Are you serious? You're actually going to believe this child's delusions?" "They're not delusions," my father replied firmly. "Look at her face. Really look at her." We turned our own daughter into someone with eyes this cold. "Tracy, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want the chance to make amends." I looked down at the envelope in his hands. To me now, that amount was less than a single day's worth of transactions. "Dad, Grandpa lived far away, and yet he kept sending me money every month, cutting back even on his own food. While you sat at home watching TV in silence and Mum stood by as my tuition paid for Katie's car, Grandpa was holding my life together with his meager savings. Then I delivered the final blow. I will accept the repayment. That is my rightful claim, but don't think that means we become a normal family again starting tomorrow. I haven't forgiven you. This is simply to ensure that you never affect my life again." I turned to my mother and Katie. "Mum, Katie, I will not request any corrections to the article, nor will I offer any financial support. If your reputation in the community has collapsed, then face your past actions and resolve it yourselves." "What? You're abandoning us?" My mother collapsed onto the floor. The woman who once reigned as the absolute queen of our household was sobbing on the floor of my office. I felt nothing. "You abandoned me first." I pressed the intercom and called my assistant. "Please see our guests out and make sure they are never allowed into the building without an appointment again." Escorted by security, my mother and Katie were dragged from the room. My mother hurled curses at me until the very end, but once the soundproof doors closed, everything was wrapped in a calm, soothing silence. Only my father lingered, turning back one last time to look at me quietly before he left. Alone in the room, I gazed out the window. It's finally over, Tracy. At some point, Sean had come up behind me and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Yes, it took a long time, but it finally feels like my past is truly in the past. I squeezed Sean's hand. Family, the curse I once believed I could never escape. Freed from it at last, I felt lighter than ever before. The stolen tuition, the tainted wedding, all of it had become fuel that led me to this day. That was how far I had come. 6 months passed after that storm-like confrontation in the conference room. Sean and I now stand together on the balcony of our new home. It was a sanctuary we had earned by building our company with our own hands, overcoming countless hardships, and claiming the reward we deserved. Since that day, my father has kept his promise, sending money every single month without fail. The amount isn't large, but to me it's proof that he's confronting his past mistakes and trying to break free from my mother's control. He now lives alone, participates in local volunteer work, and continues counselling in an effort to reclaim himself. My mother, on the other hand, has been completely cut off from the once glamorous community she ruled. Served with divorce papers, she now scrapes by with a part-time job in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. As for Katie, losing her sponsors ultimately forced her to give up on going pro. She now works at a small local sporting goods store. If I had saved them back then, they would never have understood the gravity of exploiting someone else's effort. Their suffering now is not the punishment I imposed. It is the price they must pay for their own lives. Once branded a family disgrace, I now spread my wings higher and freer than anyone else, ruling a kingdom I built with my own strength.